Today we're making apple and sage stuffing. Stuffing, very close to my heart, one of my favorite things in the world, and this one is delicious. So to start making stuffing, we get a lot of questions and people have a lot of panics and fears around making stuffing. It's really very, very simple to do, and this is a fantastic version that I think you might like. So I'm gonna start by sauteing some diced onion and celery. I've preheated my pan a little bit with some oil. So you hear that sizzle, that's a good thing. So we're gonna add onion and celery first and just stir this around. And what we wanna do is cook this down a little bit. Classic stuffing garnish, onion and celery, really nice flavor, really very aromatic. So we're gonna start cooking that down. Eventually we're gonna add garlic. We don't wanna add garlic too soon. Garlic has a very high sugar content. So if you try to saute it or cook it very early in the cooking process, it has a tendency of burning. So if we can leave that out for a minute, and add it right closer to the end, you'll get a brighter garlic flavor with less chance of it burning. Once you've burnt garlic, it's a flavor that you can't really get rid of, so you want to stay on top of it and make sure that it cooks in nice and fresh at the very end. So this is going to saute for a minute. While that's going, we're making apple stuffing today, so I have some apples that I'm going to dice into my bread cubes. Bread, we've pre-cubed. We just bought day-old French bread from the grocery store. Any bread will work though. Stuffing it's about a hearty filling, so if you wanted to save some bread chunks in your freezer, buy some day-old French bread and just cube them up. You don't need to worry about them being perfect squares. If you really wanted to tear them, you could, but we like to cut these into about half-inch cubes. And the drier they are, the better. They're gonna absorb some moisture. If they're drier or more stale, you'll actually get more yield out of your stuffing as opposed to fresh bread. So my apples. To add my apples, we're gonna peel and dice these. We're using Granny Smith apples today. They're very, very firm. They have a nice crunch and they stand up well to baking. A little bit tart, so the flavor profile will work quite well in them. And what I want to do is peel them. So I'm just going to start by peeling my apples. If there's a little bit of skin left on them, that's okay. You just want to get the majority off. And you can use any apple that you have will certainly work. So give them a good peel. And then we're going to dice these. Now, because I'm using Granny Smith, they're not going to break down very much, so I want to dice these to about the right size. Skins go. Put my skins into my composter. And then to dice my apple, I like to take a whole apple and just cut 4 sides off of it, which leaves me the core. It's a little bit quicker and easier way of cutting it. So then once I have that part of my apple broken up, we can talk about dicing it. So to dice something means nice little squares. And no one's gonna judge you if your squares aren't absolutely perfect. By cutting the apple, your 4 sides off the apple like this, it makes it a little bit more uniform. So the easiest way to get nice little squares is once you've cut this side off is just cut them into decent sized chunks. If you find your wedge is a little bit too big, you can certainly cut that in half if you wanted to get really finicky. But I'm okay with, so you have perfect squares. Or if you just wanted to take your apple like this and slice it, turn it sideways or 90 degrees and slice the other way, you'll get a little bit bigger pieces. Sometimes they're a little bit more rectangle than the perfect square that this one is, but in the stuffing they'll be delicious. So I'm just going to do these as larger pieces. So there's my apples diced. These I'm going to add to my bread cubes. And that will be the base of my stuffing. We'll come back over here. My onions and celery are starting to get really nice. They're going a nice bright color. I don't have any color on my onions yet, but it's going a really nice light bright green. You can tell they're cooking. They smell really beautiful and aromatic. So now I'm going to add my garlic. My garlic can go in and I'll stir that around. I don't want to cook my garlic for very long at all. Like I said, I want to be very mindful that I don't burn it. I just want to get that nice garlic smell and aroma into my stuffing. So I like to give my garlic about a minute. Give it a good stir, make sure it's mixed in. This is going to continue to bake for about an hour in the oven after we have it all mixed together, so not really worried about it cooking completely in the pan. So my garlic, and then I have some apple juice. Some delicious apple juice can go in. Again, you'll hear a little sizzle. And this is, again, to deglaze. We spoke in other recipes, and lots of recipes talk about deglazing a pan. That's taking a moisture and adding it to a hot, dry pan and making sure you're getting any bits on the bottom that might have colored or stuck a little bit, pulling all that flavor off. As long as it's not burnt and it's just a little bit brown stuck on the bottom, by giving it a good scrape, you're gonna pull all that really nice flavor and color out, which will help our stuffing towards the end. So there's those. And then back to my big bowl of stuffing here. So I have my bread and my apples that I've added to this. A couple more things to go in here. Once I've reduced my apple juice all the way, I'm gonna add some seasoning. So salt and pepper, that's gonna enhance the flavor, sort of turn up the volume on everything. I have some fresh sage and some dry thyme. We get lots of questions about whether to use fresh or dry herbs. The answer is whatever you have at home. Fresh is a little bit nicer. It's a little bit of a different flavor profile. Fresh sage is very, very nice, especially around holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. It really adds a really nice flavor or depth to your dish, but dry works just as well. So we have some dried thyme here, and the easy thing about dried herbs is you have them at home. You can kind of just spoon them in whenever you need them. You don't need a special trip to the store. So those two things will go in. I have some butter, which is going to add some richness, and some chicken stock. Chicken broth, chicken stock, whatever you have at the store. We make our own chicken stock here. There's a bunch of chefs that help each other out and make stock, but if you're going to buy it at the store, that's great too. Okay, so our apple juice is reduced really nicely with our celery and onions and garlic. So now we're gonna add some other things to that. So I've got some butter. The butter's gonna go in, and really this is the base for our stuffing. So I'm adding butter, and that just has to go in until it melts. Some chicken stock, that can go in. We have dry thyme. We've got some really nice fresh sage, and the salt and pepper. Can all just go in, and I just want to bring all this together until my butter is melted. The butter is going to add a really nice richness to your stuff or to your stuffing. So this just needs to come up to a boil. All those flavors are going to come together really nicely, and then once my butter is melted, we'll pour this over our bread mixture. So back to our bread mixture. We've got our bread and our apples. Let's mix this up. It seems like quite a bit of volume in here, but once you add all this moisture, the onions and the celery and the liquid, it's going to reduce down. It's going to absorb really nicely, and then this is what we're going to use to bake it. Okay, so our butter is melted now for our stuffing. This smells delicious, beautiful, fresh. The sage is really, really nice. You can smell all those really great herbs, and there's lots of moisture in here. So this moisture is going to make the bread, it's going to hydrate the bread and make a really beautiful stuffing. It will cook the apples a little bit, and then we'll finish them in the oven. So what I want to do is just take my filling here and sort of evenly pour it over our stuffing, and you can see my bread's going to start to shrink right away because it's going to get really wet. Make sure you get all the good bits out of your pan. Because we deglaze, the pan's nice and clean, no business left on the bottom. So now what I want to do is just stir this around. You can see all these nice chunks, and I just want to fold this together to get my apples and my onions and celery and herbs and all those great flavors to mix. My bread has lost quite a bit of volume because it was once stale, and now it's got that nice moisture of the cooking liquid poured over top of it. So give it a really good stir, and then from here we can press this into a greased pan to bake it. We recommend cooking your stuffing on the side. It cooks things a little bit easier or more quickly. It makes your day go a little bit easier if you're trying to do a whole bunch of different things on a celebratory day, Christmas or Thanksgiving. So by cooking it in a separate pan, it buys you some oven space and some time. So I've got a greased casserole dish here. I just rubbed it with a little bit of oil. You could use butter or some pan spray as well. And what I want to do is just scoop my bread into here. Beautiful, just like that. Like so. And then we're going to cover this with some foil and bake it in the oven for about 45 minutes or an hour. If you'd like to uncover it and crisp it up on the end, you can certainly do that as well, and you have a delicious apple stuffing. So here's our stuffing fresh out of the oven. We baked it for about 45 minutes covered to get it nice and hot, and then took the cover off and browned the top for about 15 or 20 minutes in the oven. Delicious, fresh, beautiful apple sage stuffing. Sure to be a hit with your family.